Hello, thank you for joining us here today. Today we'll be talking about the harm that masking can do to neurodivergent women. We will start out by all introducing ourselves and stating our neurodivergence. Um, my name is Elyse, and I have ADHD and autism.
Yeah, Ray, you wanna go on?
Yeah, my name is Rihanna. I go by Ray and I have ADHD.
Yeah, my name is Justina, and I'm an ADHD coach. I'm also neurodivergent.
So masking is defined as hiding or camouflaging neurodivergent traits to conform with societal norms.
Mm.
Um, do you what are how do you guys define masking? For me, it's not a term I even heard of until I was diagnosed. I didn't know what it was.
Yes, yes, but this term, I really agree with the definition. I think it's a good one. And it's interesting that until my diagnosis, I was diagnosed in my adulthood. I had no idea about it, but surprisingly, it affected my whole life, and I had no
Mm.
idea.
I didn't know the term until I kind of learned about it clinically, but I definitely always felt like I was in a way masking it. So when it did come up, I felt like I related to it a lot. I understood the need to conform to social norms when maybe on the inside there's that tendency to always kind of divert, like your thoughts are always going in kind of a different direction. And you know that that's not the direction that society is going. So you kind of have to either not say anything or say the right thing, act the right way. I think I also recognized when I wasn't wearing a mask and when I was, when I was like a little bit more myself and the labels I was given then versus when I did put on the mask and like the labels that I avoided.
Yeah,
Um,
I also think that this masking thing is something that shows to ourselves that we feel different than the rest. And this is like this sign. I always felt I'm different, but I didn't know I mask. And when I found out this term, it was sort of a relief as well that, okay, my true self doesn't have to be this one which is conforming.
yeah. I was in probably preschool when I was like, oh, I'm different than the other kids, and it made me feel really alienated. And I remember like hearing, some parents don't want to tell their kids too young because they don't want it to be a stigma. And I know that was a situation where, people don't want their kids diagnosed because, they don't want that label on them. But, kids without being diagnosed know that there's something different anyway. For you guys, what was your experience of that? Like, how young did you realize that you were different?
I think for me, I always had an understanding. I was given like the label free spirit. I always kind of walked to the beat of my own drum. So I always understood that I was very independently thinking. My train of thought didn't always follow the norm. But I think I also connected with people who were that same way.
Yeah.
So I definitely found myself in like the outliers, the kind of rebel ones, the people who were a little more artsy or different in some way.
Yeah, I agree. I always felt different. Even I remember when I was 5 year old, and I always preferred to be alone rather than with my peers. And I remember I was in hospital. I had some surgery as a 5 year old kid, and there was so many kids on the ward, and I was just playing with my toy in the corner, and I was so happy that I don't have to interact with anyone. And I remember I had this sort of feeling, and I remember like it was yesterday, that, oh wow, I'm alone and I feel so good. Finally, finally. So it was from very young age for me as well.
I feel like for me, the negative consequences of it was I realized early on, even if I ask for help, no one's going to understand that I need help. So a wall began to build between me and other people where I'm like, okay, like there's always gonna be a barrier. And I did meet people like myself where it was different. But most of the time I was like, okay, like you kind of have to figure things out on your own. If you tell people what you're struggling with, they'll be like, there won't be like they would have difficulty being like, why? That's not a difficult thing. So I learned to kind of hide things from people. Um, and then I did develop an eating disorder in high school and college. And actually, women with ADHD and autism are much more likely to develop eating disorders as a way of control when the environment feels so out of control. So I feel like it's part of masking, possibly. Um, and then, when I had bad periods of burnout starting in my 20s because masking takes up a lot of energy. And from what I read, I'm trying to find the specific article, but women with neurodivergence tend to have higher rates of autoimmune diseases because of all the suppressing of emotion. I'd like to get a statistic on that. But for you guys, what has been the negative consequences of masking, do you think?
Yeah, for me, I also suffered from eating disorder in my teenage years, and a lot of a lot was going on inside of me that I didn't show outwardly. So I think a lot of stress, a lot of tension whenever you have to go into interaction at school, especially, and not knowing who you really are, because until I had my diagnosis, I didn't know, is it my true self that I'm showing to the world, or is my true self this tormented girl who is struggling inside, or is it somewhere else? So I think I'm regaining my identity only now after my ADHD and autism diagnosis.
I think for me, negative connotations, especially around ADHD, because there's that divergence of thinking and the divergence of behaviors and kind of doing what you feel you want to do and not following social norms. I feel like within my family, and then like somehow it just felt like I got a troublemaker kind of label, like trouble would follow me. I was always kind of the ringleader leading people in like the wrong direction, or I was the one following someone in the wrong direction. So I think I was really susceptible to peer pressure, and I then was also like doing that to others, like leading them into like different directions. And so I had that conflict inside me that I didn't feel in any way that I was a bad person. I never meant ill intent. I was never trying to cause harm to other people for the most part. I was just being myself, but every time I was myself, I somehow got into sticky situations. And so that labeling of being bad, especially when I moved into adolescence, it felt like, I was a bad kid, I was
Yeah.
a delinquent for whatever reason. Even though I felt like a very smart girl, I felt like I was a very kind person. I think didn't, I wasn't presenting as that, or I wasn't being understood as that. And I definitely wasn't being understood as being smart. I think being an airhead was something that I was also labeled. Um, so the masking for me kind of took form in the very physical way. I didn't struggle so much with a controlled eating. I was very involved in like sports and things, so that helped with the hyperactivity. But it was like cosmetics. I started dyeing my hair. I would go through different trends of outfits. It turned into a really physical mask that I would put on in the morning. And I'd paint my face and I'd put on whatever and I'd straighten my hair and I'd go and face the day. It felt like a real costume. And then I think I continued to do that into my 20s, where I really enjoyed just thinking I could be anything. So every day is like a different costume. Like my whole life felt like it was kind of, if I'm wearing a mask, I'm just like presenting as something. This is all like a play.
Yeah.
And it just felt kind of, there's a detachment that you can have from life when you just make up a character to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and Ray, you're such an advocate for others. And I think one of the traits of autism and ADHD is being very justice sensitive. And in school, we don't just follow rules because they're rules. If we feel like they are harming other people because we've seen rules not work for us, people do tend to label us as like a troublemaker or like disruption because we're not going to tolerate seeing other people be harmed or to follow a system that we don't see the point of. And I also got, I don't know if Jesse, you had the same, I also got the bad because I wouldn't turn in my homework. I was seen as not trying. I'm surprised I graduated middle school. And yeah, I got the airhead label, and it's just like, yeah, it's like you try not to make it feel personal, but it does. And I like what you said. It's like you wear a costume
Yeah.
every day and you're like, oh, like, how am I going to, you don't just wake up and you're like, I'm going to be me and go outside. It's a lot of like scripting and preparation to be like, okay, like, how am I going to present to people today? Because, you know, I know that I have to put a little work in. And like, until I got my diagnosis, I thought, oh, everyone kind of does that. And I was like, not as much as I do. But eventually, like, I found myself going through a cycle of burnout because I would go through these phases, but then like, I would get tired of playing the character. I couldn't do anymore. I slipped up or I wasn't perfect. And I was like, okay, I have to start a new life somewhere else. Like my solution was
Yes.
like, okay, this role is over. Like time to move on to the new identity. And it was just like, and I was like, am I going to be like running from myself forever? And it just became the pandemic was the thing that finally stopped me. I was like, okay, like I'm out of places to run, but it's a hard life to live.
It is.
Mhm.
It really is. I also have a similar story to what Ray said, that a lot of makeup, 14-year-old, I already have dyed hair, blonde and black, then red, everything. Just, yeah, trying on different things. And I think that inside of me, I was really wanting to wake up one day and think, okay, this red hair is who I really am. It's like this trying to find, not only to show to other people, but also to find for yourself who you really are, because you're not seen by the society for who you really are. You're just seen for the negative traits, sort of negative
Yeah.
traits, like troublemaker or, yeah. I agree with this 100% what you said.
I feel like, and it kind of goes into our relationships as well. And we kind of discussed this in our last conversation. It's like I got so used to social situations being painful that I was just like, I got myself in some uncomfortable situations because I was so focused on seeming normal and like masking that I wouldn't recognize the red flags in a relationship, or like I'd realize way afterwards. And then it's like, you know, like you're friends with someone or you're dating someone and you're like 3 months in, you're like, who are you? Because you're so focused on like being the person you think they want you to be. You don't even realize like, oh my God, I don't even know you kind of thing, which is always unsettling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
What
think
is yours?
oh, you can go.
No, you
Were
can
you
go.
I think I definitely have a lot of like hyperactivity. So for a lot of like late adolescence into my 20s, I smoked a lot of weed to like sedate myself to kind of come to a baseline so I can be not like the Energizer bunny all the time and I can be relaxed around people. Um, but I think in social situations because of that, I could really dissociate from people. I could kind of just be there, but not really being present. And so I do recognize like definitely some romantic relationships where a few months in, I'm like, I don't even, how did I get here? Like, I don't even like you. And um and so yeah, I had to like really take a step back from romantic relationships to like recognize that I was not mutually involved in this. It was just another relationship where I was kind of going through the motions with the mask on.
Yeah.
I also think that, as we discussed in the last talk, that we are prone to abuse. We
Yeah.
are prone also as ADHDers to what you, Ray, said, that I don't know whether you said that, but I'm saying that you put on this mask and you think that somebody will fit to this mask, and then you change it and you realize that maybe another person will be an appropriate one, and there is no you in this, and you're not committed in the relationship, and you very often go into the relationship which is not good for you. And I found also in my lifetime that it's very easy to we are prone to love addictions as well.
Yeah.
That
The hyper
you
focus.
yeah, yeah. And it's something I think worth mentioning, that this love addiction and really, really desperately fighting for some kind of affection from another person or some kind of interest is something that can be really harmful in our lives,
Yeah.
just as eating disorders or any addiction.
Well, I feel like we can hyper focus on people to the extent that when we get involved with them, we're so hyper focused and intense that like we definitely will ignore like, oh, like the red flags because we're kind of idolizing them. But at the same time, like that statistic, by the age 12, kids with ADHD have heard 20,000 negative words about them. Like when someone says something that another person would be like, hey, that's offensive. Like I'll admit, I am less likely if someone insults me to get up and leave because I'm like, I'm just used to it right now. Like I numb myself out, like disassociate, where I'm like, oh, like I kind of just deserve what they said to me as
Yeah.
well. So we are at high risk for being in these kind of abusive relationships. And I think, you know, we kind of discuss resources and it's like, and I know, Ray, you've worked in counseling. It's hard because I realize there's not a lot of resources for ADHD and autistic women that are helpful because it's like, oh, here's an 800 number. I feel like a lot of times we have to support each other in what resources we have because yeah, it's like trying to explain to someone on like a telephone what you're going through and like, you know, if you have ADHD and autism as a woman, you're not going to sound like maybe the victim or like you're not going to be able to explain it in the right way. So it's like if we get stuck in one of these relationships, it's so much harder to navigate your way out of it.
I also think I just wanted to add to the relationship topic that what you said, that we hear so much negative comments, so much negative feedback over the years, that when we meet somebody who is not like that, who really accepts us for who we really are, it's also difficult to trust such
Oh yeah.
person.
It's
Yeah.
it's like I think something's wrong with them. Like if I meet someone and they're like too nice to me and accepting, I'm like, oh, like it almost I don't trust them because and I'll admit this, I'm still on the journey to like myself. And it's just like I think that's the hard thing is like, yeah, you've kind of been taught to hate yourself. As a neurodivergent woman, you're like, oh, I'm never good at like I have to have all these change all these things about myself. And like if someone likes you for who you are internally, if you don't like who you are, it's just like something's wrong with you. And if someone comes up to you and is like, yeah, something is wrong with you, you're like, yeah, someone agrees. And like it's more comfortable with them, as disturbing as that is. Um,
Mm.
I'm still on my path to unmasking. And to be honest, like I'm like it's been very scary and like there's still days where I'm like, Elyse, who are you? Like it feels upsetting to not know who I am underneath all of this. How do you
Mm.
have you guys gone on your unmasking journey in that part of it?
Um, I think for yeah, well into my 20s and I just hit 30, I was, the mask became a fun costume that I would wear. And just like you, Elyse, I would have like a time limit for each character, and then I would be ready to start a new life somewhere and start over with a new character. And I did feel that there was a strong sense of self inside of myself, but I really had a hard time understanding that until I worked with autism and ADHD in a testing site with kids. and I saw their symptoms like my own as a child. Like their room was a mess and they collected all these things. And I think back, I used to like write on my walls. I used to think things had like inanimate objects had like thoughts and feelings. And so counseling these kids and hearing that these are symptoms of ADHD, and it's not that I'm just a very strange, weird person, that I could never sleep at night. I had really like I was always hyperactive. I always had these like things that made me different. And they just piled up and I didn't really know what to do with them. I didn't know where they belonged. I didn't know if this was just like, oh, maybe I just have a tendency to be depressed or I'm just always going to be very high energy. There was no real diagnoses that I could give myself or personality disorder that I could give myself when I'm going through this clinical program. Because you're always trying to understand like, okay, what do all my symptoms mean? And it wasn't until I was working with the kids and I saw their symptoms just so simply laid out. And, when you're a kid, you can't really hide it. It was before they learned how to mask. And I remember thinking in so many sessions, like, I was like, do I have autism? Because I would leave and I felt like, wow, like that is exactly my childhood experience. But it's the neurodivergent symptomology overlaps in so many different ways. Um, so autism, ADHD, the symptomology can really present in very similar ways. Um, but yeah, it was until seeing it with the kids that I was like, okay, that's what it is. And now I can accept myself and stop trying to like figure out what my mental illness is. I'm okay. I've just always been a little different. And it's not a mental thing. It's like who I am as a person. It's my like neurodevelopmental self. It's like in the way that I feel things, in the way that I smell things, my energy level, my sleep, my tendency to be awake late at night. All of these things are not a flaw. It's just some people are wired a little differently. And I'm just one of those people. So it wasn't until and living in California and kind of coming into this last phase of my life that I felt like I don't want to wear a mask anymore. Like, what does it even look like to take it down? And that's a process of like kind of deconstructing, like, what was a mask? What does it feel like to not wear it? Um, yeah. And who am I and what do I want without it? Definitely going into relationships. I think this is the first step of my life where I'm like, I actually want to be with someone that I like. I'm not just going to wait until someone comes along and likes me, and then I'll, go through that process and then maybe I'll end up liking them and then at least we'll hang out and whatever. Now I'm like, oh no, I want to choose the person I want to be with. I don't want them to just come and find me.
I think it's so important what you said regarding the word that I have for myself when my unmasking started. It was when my acceptance started of myself started to grow. And of course, an understanding. Also, I wouldn't like to diminish the role of ADHD meds because when they started to help me and sort of calm me down, I was actually able to process my past, who I am right now, because this hyperactivity wasn't that tiring, because this is tiring as well, not only masking, but also the ADHD itself. So, yeah, for me, it's work in progress, and I think it will be forever work in progress because, yeah, that we are human. But my story started of unmasking started after bad life decisions, bad situations that happened to me, and I started my therapy. And I think therapy also really can help with unmasking and finding your own voice. So whenever I'm approaching some decision making right now, I think, is it my mask that want to do it, or is it the real me? And assessing all the time who I really am and discovering that. So this is my process of unmasking.
And I feel like, what you said about the medication for me, sort of my brain kind of quieted down, and it is like it was scary to take the medication because when I first took it, I was like, how much of my personality is this going to take away? And you kind of have to weigh the overall benefit. And I was like, yeah, my brain is a lot clearer so I can process things. And it did help. I feel like starting coaching also was helpful because for the first time, I feel like coaching for the first time, but I had someone saying, what's telling me what was right with me rather than what was wrong with me. And I feel like that's so important in our lives to have those people that point out the things that are right with us instead of just what's wrong. Because for most of my life, I was like, everything's wrong with me. I don't really see like too many positive things. And that helped, give me a lot of encouragement in my unmasking journey, even though um it was scary. And I'll tell you, this is not like in terms of my career, and I know that we have a very interesting, all of us have very interesting careers and backgrounds that are, you guys, so impressive. But yeah, masking in my career, like I realized for a long time that I was trying to have my career in the way that I thought would be impressive. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer because my mom wants me to be a lawyer. I want to get my doctorate because I was like, I, want that validation. Like getting my master's degree, the first thing I thought of was like, I wonder if my seventh grade teacher is going to think I'm dumb anymore. Like I feel like I wanted those degrees as like part of my uniform because I was like, it's proof that I'm smart. And then I got them and I was like, I still feel not very smart. I said that even grammatically incorrect. But yeah, it's like I feel like in the way my career has gone and like I've taken this sabbatical and right now I'm back to writing because it's the only thing that has been healing to me so far. But yeah, it's really affected my career choices. I'm going to see what you guys have masking as kind of how do I say it's affected, your career choices.
It's hard for me to say because my ADHD was really the winner on this journey, and it was trying on so many things and always hearing from my family, you won't be good at anything because you start too many things and you're not finishing them, like degrees or courses. And I also I'm a vocalist as well, and I think that also it can be positive, the thing that you want to impress someone, because I want to be seen and be on stage and finally reverse sort of being always in the minority. It led me to a place which I really enjoy, and I enjoy being on stage. So this has a flip side as well, because we can achieve quite a bit. It can be our fuel. But on the other hand, you have to be really careful, as you at least said, whether this is me or this is 100% trying to impress someone.
Mm. I think for me, career-wise, the the figuring out like what was wrong with me was a big thing. So I went into psych. I found a lot of peace of mind in yoga. It was like the only place that I could find peace of mind. So I always knew I would do those two things together. And so I'm very grateful that when I kind of graduated high school, that plan came to me, and I've been able to kind of stay on that path throughout my career. That being said, because I was able to mask for so long, um, it really is so easy to public speak for me. I love to kind of get up and talk to people. I'm not afraid of getting in front of a class and teaching or standing up and doing workshops because it's always been kind of a show. So it feels kind of like um, it, I'm happy for, yeah, it can be a superpower. It's definitely something we learned to kind of trick the world whenever we wanted to. But definitely the ADHD comes in with travel for me. I was always bouncing around. I think for the last like 10 years, it was just constantly like kind of moving from one place to another or traveling months at a time. Just because I don't know, I didn't know where I was or I was running away from myself. So although I had a clear idea of my career, there was just so many different places that I was doing that career. So many different studios that I would do, or like I'd have this job, but I'd want a different job, or it It was a lot of just bouncing around. Um, yeah, it's been a journey. It's
I
but I'm
also
grateful
thought,
for it, right? We've gotten to do a lot of things. I
Yeah.
think with ADHD, get to do a lot of random things.
I feel like it'd be cool to list all of our, I don't know in the comments, but like, I know you guys have done so many things, like all of our things, because all of us have done like a variety of really cool things. And I think in part to our ADHD. Like, I feel
yeah,
like
we can
mine is
we
like,
can actually write about
I
it.
know, it's like
Yeah.
we all have like really cool resumes. And I think,
Yeah. I think
um,
in testing, especially with adults, that's how I would always kind of know for sure, like this is clear ADHD, because they'd come in and they'd have like three different
oh
degrees,
yeah,
and they'd be like, they lived here for some time, and they like did this random odd job, and they just had like such a fantastical life,
yeah.
half done. What's that saying? Like a master of none is, oh, what's the saying?
Um,
Like,
a jack of all trades is a master of none. But really, I think we are
but
Renaissance
a jack
women,
of all trades
you
is
know?
better than a master of one.
Yeah, yeah. We're
So,
Renaissance women is really another
mhm.
phrase. Um, and then how can we like, and I know you've worked with kids, right? Like for the next generation, like how do you think society can stop those kids, like the kids that you worked with, from having to mask? Because yeah, we know that it causes damage. And I know you kind of experienced some of the systemic flaws in that for your work. And Justina, I know like you've also worked with kids and like I've um seen some of the systemic failures. How can like as a society and schools we work on making things better so that people don't have to pretend to be what they're not?
I think that's a hard one
It's a
because
big one.
kids are always kind of going to want to lean towards the midline no matter what adults tell them. They do want to conform. And we also just live in such a different world, even though it's only been like 20, 30 years since we were young,
Yeah.
just such a different ball game for them, the way they talk about mental illness. I think it's one thing to acknowledge that we have neurodivergence, that our brain works in this way, but I think the problem is when kids only identify as being neurodivergent and they don't recognize that that's the foundation and everything else is who
Yeah.
they are. Um, but I don't know because the kids these days have like a very different world to face.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I work with kids mostly in Poland that are based in Poland, and it's we still have a lot of to catch up with another countries where the awareness is much broader. So my dream is to teachers to be educated on neurodivergence because I coach teens and I can see how many of them are struggling. They get the bad notes in their school diary because of their behavior. I experienced the same thing. I was all the time the behavior was the worst, and uh, it's my dream that teachers are actually well prepared to do their job rather than punish kids.
Yeah. No, I think that's true because like, and I remember when I got my master's in mental health degree, even in and I don't know how your doctorate is probably more extensive, but in the, state accredited master's program, they didn't even all we knew about ADHD and autism was in the DSM, what we call the DSM-5. But I wasn't shown, okay, the ADHD brain is different, the autistic brain is different. And if therapists aren't being shown that in the state, I graduated less than a decade ago, then teachers aren't. And it's like, teachers are always like, oh, they can try harder or like, and they don't know why. I think they need to know
Yeah.
why it's different for ADHD and autistic students, because until they know that the brain is different, they're going to be like, okay, like they just need to try harder. So I think there needs to be more knowledge shared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
empathy.
definitely in the doctoral program, I feel you don't get like a vast training on neurodivergence. I got a little bit in some of my classes, just in like the cognitive behavioral, like when we're talking more in the uh, neuropsych, like the classes that people kind of they listen to a little, but they don't really listen to. So it's definitely like a niche field, and I'm really grateful that I went through with the testing and I ended up with the ADHD autism batteries because it was just so personally like there was a huge light bulb moment for me personally where I just connected so much with these kids and I saw it so clearly. And so in that, having those conversations where they know ahead of time, like you're not going to fit in at school, like, and it's just going to be how it is in systems, you likely won't be enjoying yourself when you're in any institution, but you'll be very creative. You can be very successful. When I talk about like the CEOs of companies, like they're not the normal, they're not atypical. They're not the typical, they're the atypical to have reached that level. So I feel like there is an encouragement that like, yes, you'll be a little bit of a tortured creative soul and you'll be bouncing from this identity to this identity, but you'll look back on your life and you'll have done so many amazing things and um, you'll have lived a lot, walked down a lot of different paths, even though maybe that's more tiring than just walking straight.
Yeah,
Um,
I
beautiful.
think it's a good way to sum up also,
Yeah.
start to sum up our
Yeah.
talk, as we want to do it ADHD friendly as
I
well. So
I think yeah, Ray said it beautifully. It's like learning that hey, you're a little bit different, but that's okay and like you're gonna walk a different pathway and I think that's a nice closing to this conversation is that we're all learning to unmask and like it's a journey and we you know, there is hope at the end of it and like giving ourselves credit. Sometimes I feel like we don't give ourselves credit for all that we accomplish. Sometimes I like look at my LinkedIn and I was like, who is that person? I was like, I did all that stuff, but I don't feel like it. Like I wake up every day and forget. And I think like remembering to appreciate who we are because I think just you and I were talking about this once about all of our masks and we called it like a love story. Even though like
mhm.
it was a mask, it still was us and it's like a love letter to other people. And like those are still pieces of ourselves. So it wasn't a waste of time.
Yeah. I also
Yeah.
think I just wanted to add one more thing to what could help unmask is find your folks, find your people. Like even this talk that we have right now, we are thousands of
Yeah.
kilometers apart, but it's really like soothing that you're not alone after feeling so alone for so long time. So I would always suggest, I can see even the power of coaching, ADHD coaching, is that you can relate to another person both ways. It works both
mhm.
ways. And I can see the clients are really, really spreading their wings after they feel seen and understood also by somebody with ADHD.
Yeah, I think that that's a big, big part is just having someone understand those really small things that you've dealt with all your life and they just know it, they feel
Yeah.
it, they've also experienced it. You don't even have to really say it. But when you do, it's like, oh, yeah, I had that too. So, yeah, safe spaces. And I feel, yeah, even
Validating.
though we just
Yeah.
met, Justine, I feel very close to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is special because yeah, we've all experienced similarities. And I remember like in the class, like when you meet someone that has ADHD or autism, there is like a kinship,
Yeah.
even if you don't, it's just like such a shared experience. And I think it is important to like you grow up so much of your life being like, I'm the only one and you're afraid to tell people. But like it is such a special moment. Like it does feel very special that all three of us are here communicating and are neurodivergent women and like sharing similar experiences.
Yeah. I think it's actually I know we're doing this for YouTube, but I'm 100% sure that each of us feel a little bit more comforted
Yeah, yeah,
after such exchange
Hmm.
at least I'm speaking for myself. That's it's
Yes.
oh, again the
Like
reminder
not
that
alone.
Yeah,
We're
just a
going through this
reminder, for sure,
together,
yeah. I
Yeah.
yeah
was feeling like today, even just a little bit of that, the ADHD, like hyperactive, hyperproductive. And then I was just like, oh, I can't do anything. Like I'm so depleted. And then I had to like kind of really push myself. I feel like as an adult now, I can get up and be like, okay, no, I'm going to do the good things and like get myself regulated again. I'm not going to let myself stay dysregulated. But just having this conversation and reminding myself, like, this is this is part of it. It's
Yeah.
part of like sometimes you're going to be hyperproductive and you're going to get things done, and sometimes you're not. And both of those things are okay. And people experience that all the time. And so if a little existential dread comes in your day, it's just another day.
Yeah.
yeah
No, it's for me, it's like because our energy, like even on medication, the energy is so we're not see we tend to burn out in 9 to 5 jobs because we don't have predictable, stable energy. And I'll have like a day where I get so much done. And then the next day or 2 days, I won't get anything done and I'll feel so bad about myself. But like, yeah, you get into that with ADHD and autism, you get into that burnout. But it's like you're always gonna have a little fluctuation. And then with the medication, it's more consistent, but then you have the burnout in the evening and it's like a trade-off. You're like, okay, um, that is hard to kind of
Mhm.
like accept. But just kind of recognizing like, it's our energy, like I'll be able to get a week's worth done in a day that a
Mhm.
normal person could get stuff done and not thinking. I used to think every day had to be a hyper focused day, like where I got 40 hours of work done and then I would burn out so bad after that.
yeah yeah
Yeah.
okay